Hi, everyone. My name is Harper, and welcome to No Whisk, No Reward. Thank you for joining me today. Today, we're just going to be going over some tips for healthier baking. If you're anything like me, maybe you're a hobby baker, or maybe you're a stress baker. I'm definitely guilty of that. Maybe you just want to have some recipes to share with friends or something healthy to give your kids, but this will definitely be a good presentation to give you guys some healthy baking tips so you can have some healthy snacks or breakfast to keep around. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. All right, so we've got four main things we're going to be covering today. We're going to talk about controlling portion size, some healthy ingredients you can add to your baked goods, some healthy swaps you can make, and then at the end, I'm going to be sharing one of my favorite muffin recipes for an oatmeal blueberry muffin. All right, so as many of you are probably aware, most baked goods you buy at the store are well above the normal portion size. For example, a single blueberry muffin from Kroger is 450 calories and contains 33 grams of added sugar. I know we've all been to the stores too and seen those giant cookies that are the size of your head. And that's a lot more than one person can eat or one person should necessarily be eating when it comes to sugar for sure. So we can control these portion sizes by baking our own pastries. One thing we can do is use mini muffin tins for muffins or cupcakes. One of my favorite things to do if you have a larger muffin tin is use a silicone muffin cup to control portions. These are a personal favorite of mine. They're good for the environment and they are super easy to clean. So if you already have some or if you want to purchase some, I definitely recommend those. Another thing we can do if we're making cookies is we can use a tablespoon or cookie scoops to control the size of those cookies and not get those giant size of your head cookies when we bake them. There are also some healthy ingredients that we can add to our baked goods. And it's important to keep in mind that adding healthy ingredients doesn't necessarily make your baked goods healthy. Just because your cookie has a fruit in it doesn't mean that it's a healthy cookie, but they make your baked goods a lot more nutritious and they add a lot of really great flavor. So you might want to consider adding dried or fresh fruit, nuts, seeds, or dark chocolate to your muffins and cookies. One of my favorite things to do with cookies is add sunflower seeds and dark chocolate. It adds this really great flavor. I love it. Right, so we're gonna cover some healthy swaps now. The first one I'm gonna talk about is flour. So, as many of you are probably aware, it's best to sub whole wheat flour for white flour when you can. It has more nutrients than white flour and it's lower in calories, which is really great. Also, if you're someone that doesn't like sweet stuff as much, whole wheat flour, I find when I bake with it, makes your baked goods taste a little bit less sweet. So it's really nice if you don't want that just overwhelmingly sweet, like give you a headache kind of muffin. If you're making gluten-free baked goods, you can consider using chickpea flour or almond flour. These are two really great options that I bake with a lot. I love using chickpea flour in particular because of the protein that it adds, and both of these are going to be really high in fiber too, which is great. Another thing you can do is consider mixing different types of flours for different textures and more nutrients. So one thing that I love doing is mixing whole wheat flour with almond flour. It just gives this really interesting, like chewy but still fluffy texture. I highly recommend trying it out. We can also cut sugar in our recipes and use natural sweeteners. You can reduce the sugar in almost every recipe by a fourth a cup without a noticeable difference in taste. I do this with every single recipe I make, no matter what type of baked good it is, and I've never had a problem, especially if you're using something sweeter like bananas or pumpkin in your recipes. You can go ahead and cut the sugar by a half cup most of the time, and you're not going to notice a difference. So I highly recommend doing that. You can also consider using natural sweeteners like honey or maple syrup. I don't have it on here, but you can use agave nectar as well if you prefer that. It's important to keep in mind that your body will still process these as normal sugar. Your body cannot tell the difference between sucrose and then the sugars in honey and maple syrup. However, honey and maple syrup both have a lot of micronutrients that you cannot find in regular sugar, and they have a lower glycemic index, so they're not going to cause as big of spikes in blood sugar that regular sugar does. And that's really good. It's going to prevent crashes if you know you get that sugar high and then you crash straight down. So these types of sweeteners are going to prevent that. They're really great. I personally love maple syrup just for the flavor. I'm obsessed with putting cinnamon in every single recipe, and it goes really well with that, adds an interesting flavor. However, I don't recommend using maple syrup for cookies or brownies just because it is so runny. If you want to do a sugar-free muffin, you can always use stevia or monk fruit sweetener, just 1-to-1 with that sugar, and you'll get a really nice flavor. So some healthier swaps that you can make for dairy products is you can use a low-fat or fat-free milk if you want to use regular cow dairy, or if you want to use a plant-based milk. These are really great because they are lower in calories and they have many of the same nutrients as whole plants. If you have any digestive issues, though, I would definitely recommend reading that ingredients list to make sure there's no fillers or gums in there that's gonna, disrupt your digestion a little bit. You can normally find plant milks that are just like 3-4 ingredients if you need it. Another thing with plant milks is you want to make sure that it's unsweetened. I don't know why, but just about every company adds sugar to their plant milks. I don't think it needs it, but I'd go ahead and check, read those ingredients lists when you're buying your plant milks just to make sure no weird fillers and no sweeteners. You can also swap butter for unsweetened applesauce, mashed banana, or a neutral tasting heart-healthy oil like canola oil if you'd like. Mashing bananas are a personal favorite of mine. I find that it works really well, especially for muffins and breads. We can make some healthy swaps for eggs too. Now, of course, there's nothing inherently wrong with eggs, but if we just, swap it up, make some different swaps, then we can get a wider array, of nutrients and just add some interesting flavors. One of my favorite things to do is to use 1/4 a cup of unsweetened dairy or soy yogurt for every egg used in the recipe. I love using yogurt because it just makes your muffins and your cupcakes and your cakes super light and fluffy, just gives this really great texture. However, you want to keep in mind that, of course, using the probiotics in the yogurt will be killed in the baking process. So you're not going to be getting any of those benefits. But for the texture and for, the calcium and the protein in it, I highly recommend using those. Another thing I like doing is using a flax egg for every egg used in the recipe. So if any of you guys are unfamiliar, the way to make a flax egg is mixing 1 tablespoon of flax meal with 3 tablespoons of water. One thing I like doing when I make brownies or cookies is sometimes I'll sub that water for cooled coffee. Great flavor. But you're just going to want to mix these together, then let them sit out for about 10 minutes, stir them halfway between just to make sure that it's starting to gel. And then you can just pour that in with your wet ingredients like you would any other recipe. Flax meal is really great because it's going to add omega-3 fatty acids and fiber to your baked goods. And we always want more omega-3s. Those are really great for you, especially if you're like me, I'm vegan and I don't eat a lot of fish. Well, any fish. So this is going to work best for muffins, loaves, brownies, and cookies. You can honestly use them with anything. I just really prefer yogurt for the cupcakes and cakes to get that super light, fluffy texture. Right, so I'm going to share one of my favorite recipes. I make this all the time. It's a recipe that I've veganized from Sally's Baking Addiction. So if you don't want it vegan and you want to go look up the original recipe, that's there for you. So the ingredients that we're going to use are a cup of plant-based milk of choice. I really like using soy milk. Personally, we're going to reduce that cup to 3/4 cup if we're using frozen berries, though. We're going to combine that with 1 cup of old-fashioned oats, 1 cup plus 1/4 cup of whole wheat flour, 1 teaspoon baking powder, 1 teaspoon baking soda, half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon. Although if you're like me, I don't really believe in measuring spices in my recipes. I just like to go by sight, but you can always measure it if you'd like. I also sometimes like adding nutmeg if that's something that you like, just adds a nice kick of flavor. We're going to add a 4th teaspoon of salt, 1/2 cup vegan butter, although you should consider using half a cup of mashed banana instead if you would like. We're going to add a 1/4 cup of unflavored soy yogurt. We're going to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and then a cup of fresh or frozen blueberries. So to make this recipe, we're going to set our oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit. I know that might sound kind of high, but trust me, when you set it to a higher temperature, it's going to make your muffins rise super fast, and we're just going to get that nice, tall, bakery-style muffin look. So while that's preheating, we're going to combine our milk and oats and set those aside for 20 minutes so that the oats can start absorbing some of the moisture from the milk. And just so you know, you can always switch the rolled oats for quick cook oats if you would like. I would not recommend swapping for steel cut oats though, just because those take such a long time to absorb moisture. But during this time, while those oats and milk, are setting together, melt the butter so it can be slightly cooled or mash your banana during this time. So you're going to line a muffin tin or spray with a neutral tasting oil to grease. And then after those 20 minutes are up, we're going to check the oats, make sure they've started to absorb some milk. If they haven't, we're going to stir them and let them sit for another 10 minutes. But if those are ready to go, then we'll go ahead and get a large bowl and mix together the butter, honey or maple syrup, our yogurt, and our vanilla. So we're going to whisk that together, and then we are going to add the flour, the baking soda and powder, salt, and cinnamon to the bowl, as well with any other spices that you'd like. Now, when we add these in, we want to make sure that we are using a silicone spatula or wooden spoon to fold them in. I see my friends just whisk together the ingredients the entire time that they are making their baked goods. And it drives me crazy because you really want to make sure that you are folding your ingredients in. When we whisk it, we're applying a lot more pressure to our baked goods, and that can actually make gluten start to develop. So that's going to make your baked goods really tough. And if you like tough cookies, that might be good for you, but if we're making anything else, make sure you're folding it in. So once that's folded in, we're going to add the oats along with any leftover milk and blueberries and just fold that in like we did with the dry ingredients. So we're going to use a tablespoon, or you can use just a regular kitchen spoon to put the batter into the muffin tins. We're going to fill them up to about 3/4 full. And then we're going to bake for 5 minutes at 425 degrees Fahrenheit, and then lower the temperature to 350 degrees and bake for an additional 16 to 17 minutes. When you pull those out of the oven, you want to let them cool for about 5 minutes in the tin, and then we can move those to a drying rack if you have one. If you don't, you can always use paper towels or a towel cloth. And we're going to set those on top of there and let them cool for about an additional 30 minutes. Although if you're like me, you probably have a hard time being that patient and waiting for it to cool. But once those are cool, those will last for about 3 days outside of the fridge, or you can put them in the fridge or the freezer to have a healthy snack or breakfast for up to 2 weeks. So thank you for joining me today, guys. Wow. I hope you guys try out this recipe and I hope you like it. And I hope you try out some of these tips to make your baked goods a little bit healthier. Thanks, guys. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out anytime.